Well, it's becoming quite evident that neither of you have a clue about the severity of this issue. The lack of accountability on your end has drastically affected the liability on mine. And it utterly baffles me how you failed such a simple task. This is Business 101.
Mike, we apologize for the mistake. It was an oversight on our part.
An oversight? Come on, James, drop the wordplay. You messed up. Own it. You put the reputation of my company in jeopardy.
Mike, I understand your frustration. The entire team is working around the clock to fix the situation.
Well, I appreciate you both for letting me know that, but I compensate you all very well to work around the clock, do I not?
It will be handled. We will keep you updated.
Is there anything else?
No.
Oh, by the way, Mike, happy birthday.
I expect a full report by the end of the day.
And that was a clip from the film Life of Mike. And I'm happy to sit here with the creator of this project. I mean, you're not just the producer, you're the writer and the director. So welcome, Derek Hallerman.
Hey man, I appreciate it, man. Like it was a long road here. So,
Yeah.
So I appreciate that intro.
All right, well, let's just kind of get into it. Now,
Okay.
I've never seen a film quite like this.
Wow.
So
Okay.
talk to me about, like, where did this idea come up? Like it's got a lot of things going on, but it's a compelling story.
Yeah. So many of my friends, they didn't have a father growing up in their life, so they always tried to kind of emulate them in some form or fashion. So even if they were good people or they were bad people, they tried to emulate them. So when I was thinking about this story, I was like, man, like if I can put something on film about a black man talking about having a decent family with, good wife, good friends, but they're trying to show him that he's nothing like his father. And I was like, I think I want to try to come up with something that was really, really cool, and I hope I did that.
Well, no, you mentioned you have friends, but what about yourself? Like, there had to be some of you in this story as well.
Yeah, I did have my father in my life, but I did relate a lot with my grandfather. And my grandfather was kind of a loner. He did some things. He was kind of wild. So some of the stories that he kind of told me, I kind of implemented them into this story. And when I was telling the actor Miko, which you'll talk to later, he was listening to, he heard some of these stories I was telling him. He was like, damn, man, you really want me to kind of do that or, put that into the story? I was like, yeah. So it was a lot of influence from myself and from family.
Okay. Now, looking back at the work that you've done, I mean, this is your first full-length feature.
Yeah, feature, yeah.
So why make that transition to a feature film, and then why this movie to do that feature film?
I did a short film. It was called The Assistant, and it was about assistant suicide. So I felt like I couldn't get a lot of the story into 20 minutes of that. So when this idea came about, and we were talking about, it had some suicide elements in it, and it was some kind of different. I felt like I could really express myself in a feature, a feature-length film.
But I would challenge you.
Uh-oh.
Here we go.
Here we go.
To this notion of, it's not just a feature film. I mean, it has some moments where it's introspective and therapeutic because of some of the subject matter and themes. But it's also kind of, it's a genre-breaking kind of film. It kind of hits in several categories, in my opinion, that, it's great as a story, but it's hard to classify what it is.
Yeah.
Is that something that you challenge yourself with, or did this kind of happen organically because of the story?
I think it happened organically. When people try to be great, they don't end up being great. And I'm not saying that this film is great, but I wasn't even thinking about that. Like, it's funny when I've had people who've seen the film and then they tell me certain things about the film, and I was like, man, like I wasn't even thinking about that when I was making the film. But I thought it was cool. I don't try to act like I'm a trendsetter or a genre breaker or anything like that. Man, I just wanted to make a good movie, and I really didn't want to make no comedy or no rom-com. So I was like, yo, let's do something different.
But even when you say that, to make it, I mean, to look at the film and just how stylized it is, you break a lot of rules with the camera.
Oh, yeah.
And so talk to me about how your decision-making process when you're deciding how you're going to cue up your scenes and even place your character, and do the choreography for your characters.
My proudest moment was really being the DP and the director, because a lot of times, you rarely hear that you have a DP and a director. David Fincher, I love his look in a lot of his films. He started off as a DP. So to me, I felt like me hiring a DP and telling them exactly where I want the camera, what lens I want to put on there, I might as well do it myself. But I'm heavily influenced with David Fincher, Spike Lee, Alfred Hitchcock. I really wanted to give a look where, even though if the pace of the film is kind of slow, you're still going to be into the movie where it doesn't feel like it's moving slow.
Yeah, yeah. Now, this film, again, it does kind of focus a little bit on trauma, but the story can feel somewhat universal. Talk to me about the decisions you had to make, the things that you had to keep and things you had to cut to make this story what it is.
I had to cut a lot because I was so limited in not even just funds for making the film, but just limited to the crew and limited to things that I could do. We had a scene where we had to completely cut it out because Mike's character, he was running through some woods. And when I first thought about it, I was like, yo, I think that's gonna be a really, really good scene. But when I realized the technicalities of shooting it, I knew that technically I couldn't make it, make that shot look good. So, because sometimes when you see a lower budget film, or even higher budget films, you see a fight scene, and you can just tell, like, yo, man, they just did not have the budget to shoot that because it looks horrible. So I knew what my capability was, so I cut a lot of stuff out because I didn't want to make this movie look and feel comical when it was something serious.
Right, and about that seriousness, I mean, we're talking suicide.
Yeah.
And depression.
Yeah.
And you were able to kind of keep those front of mind with your character without it stopping the momentum of the film itself.
I appreciate that.
So talk to me about, walk me through the aspect of creating this timed this story that builds up on arcs, through each act that kind of maintains itself without being overshadowed by Mike's personal traumas that are clearly shown in the film, and yet are not even though he is in almost every scene.
Yeah, every scene. Yeah.
That does not define him, but you're keenly aware of it being right there with him.
We had to really cut down on the lines.
Yeah.
Like, because as you know, sometimes silence is better than someone talking. So again, we did our first table read. It was real line heavy, and I was like, no, I don't feel like that would really portray what I really wanted. So with each act, we had to really chop down lines, but and really realized the lines that was being said, it had to mean something. So that was like the hardest part of really trying to keep the film moving, but keep the heart of it in it.
Okay. Now let's talk shop.
Okay. Okay.
So this film is being distributed and streamed on Patreon.
Yeah. Yeah.
So talk to me about the decision of why you decided to go in that direction to get the film out to people, as opposed to what some people say another traditional way of doing things.
A lot of times today, a lot of films are going on to a lot of these platforms, and they're really not getting paid, or these distributors are taking a lot of money. So I had so many offers for this film, but they were kind of insulting, you know. And for the budget that we made this film for, I just couldn't take that money, and I wanted to be in control. So with Patreon, you know, we're able to be in control of our audience. We know who's buying the film. We know we collecting data. And that's one of the things I really want to be in control of the data. And so we can always reach out to the people who really are supporting us. So, you know, when you put it on any of these other platforms, you're splitting the money 100 ways, and then you're not even collecting the data. So I wanted to be in control of that.
And speaking of control and the fact that you have this, I mean, this, again, we have to come back and we have to kind of put light on, there is a message in this film. Are you thinking about like where it can be and exist, not just for the sake of entertainment, but also for edutainment, that this can actually help people?
That wasn't even on my mind when I first made it.
You can take it.
Yeah, no, that wasn't even on my mind. But again, people like yourself and other people that saw the film, they were telling me like, man, you really need to do something. You know, you really need to do something with this. But man, I just wanted to make something, again, man, I just wanted to make something different. And I did not want to make a comedy or a rom-com.
I don't think the theme would work. It's just me.
Nah, not this one. No.
But one thing that you did do with your company, with your production company, is that you took this movie, but you also created an action that supplements that, and that is the Most Men Suffer in Silence. And can you talk to me about the origins of that, and why is it important?
When we did a test screening, we had so many people talking about the mental health with men. And I was like, man, like, because again, when I was writing it, I wasn't thinking about the mental health aspect. I was thinking of trying to help, you know, people who are coping or trying to relate with certain things. So when I had those people tell me like, yo, like, I think you really need to push toward mental health and to really try to help some people out. And everything just kind of aligned because we did our theatrical release in November. And you know, it usually takes about 6 months before you start releasing it on all the platforms. And we were going to release it before we did the Patreon deal. We were going to release it on some of the platforms. And yeah, I know I was thinking about taking a little bit of that money, but the spirit world just kept telling me like, nah, don't do it. But then I was told, they was like, you know, June is Men's Mental Health Month. And that was the month that we were going to release, you know, think about releasing the film. So I was like, you know what, let's do the Patreon deal. Let's really push this campaign. And man, let's try to make a change.
Awesome. So now this film is being released on Patreon on Juneteenth.
Yeah.
Very important day.
Oh yeah. Okay.
And so what do you hope people take away from watching this film?
I just hope that they take away that it's something different. You know, we're not just all in a box. You know, we think different, we move different. We don't always have to feel like we gotta laugh and dance. You know, we can sometimes sit down and think and sometimes feel like we can really try to make a difference in something. And to me, I just wanted this film to do that. So that was what I was thinking about.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll be right back. We're going to watch another clip from the film, and then we'll be back with one of the actors from the film.
If you hurt her in any form or fashion, I will kill you.
All right, we just saw a clip from Life of Mike, and I'm happy and delighted to be on stage now with the principal actor, Miko Dufour.
Hello.
Now you acting all shy, huh? Okay, all right.
Well, let's just kind of get into it because, I mean, this whole film focuses around your character, and more importantly, the character that you brought to life on screen. So let's start with the simple question, which is, how did you find Mike to develop him as the character that we see today?
First was the process of reading the script. As just a normal person, as a fan of reading a script, to see, all right, Mike, who he is, what he goes through, and just jot down or just make a note on things that made me say, you know, if it made me say, ooh, or whoa, it got a response out of me, I just made a check. And that helped me to build layers. Then came the process of what do me and this Mike character have in common? What can I relate to? Because there's a change in him. What can I do to portray him as a certain person throughout most of the film, and then when he reaches a pinnacle and all of a sudden drops, and what does it look like when he comes out of the fire? Pops always said, okay, you messed up, you fell down, now that you got up, what are you gonna do? And that kind of drove me throughout the process of developing my interpretation of Mike.
Okay. I was thinking about how the movie starts, which is with the discovery of the suicide. And then, you know, it immediately starts into you as an adult.
Right.
And I was kind of also curious about, you know, internalizing that trauma to also create that character.
I guess I drew from my personal life. My mother divorced my father when I was young. I had a stepfather where it was a love-hate. Still had a relationship with my father, but not being there, it affected me in a particular way. So I reached back on that and drew from that. The momentum of my stepfather, like, you know, I'm gonna teach you about the street life. This is how it's gonna be. This is what you're gonna do. Da 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 da. This is how you survive. made me mentally tougher and aware, and to have my guard up. I didn't want to, but I brought that in, I embodied that, and put that as a layer on Mike, and turned it into a real estate mogul vibe. What does that look like? You know, I know not many, but I know a few people who would be considered multimillionaires, and they're not happy. They have almost anything and everything, you know, someone could want. Beautiful wife, a family, they have money, they have this, they have that, but they're not happy, and they don't speak lovingly of their family as much as you would expect. You know, so I try to embody all of that, and like I said, it just added on is like another layer on an onion, you know.
Okay. So Derek, now you crafted the first draft, and you actually created the script for this, and when I think about the characters and your principle in this, it would be my opinion that there has to be a little bit of you in Mike as well. Can you talk to me about how you came up with this script the way that you did, and specifically how and why did you create Mike the way he is?
Wow. It had some pieces of me in it, but again, when I came up with the script, I was really thinking about Miko, because he and I, you know, we're pretty good friends, and he had kind of told me a lot of the things that he had gone through as a child, and then a couple of my partners, you know, I was like, yo, I think this would be a great script or a great story to kind of tell about fatherhood, being a son, and really trying to get out here and be your own person, other than your own man. So it had aspects of myself in it, but I really was thinking about Miko when I wrote it.
Okay. I would say one thing that I found interesting is this movie is not of one genre. It kind of spans between it has a little bit of a noir element to it. It is suspenseful, it's a little bit of a drama. It's definitely a kind of a retrospective kind of a story to look at. But it also has, I don't want to spoil anything, it has other elements in the film as well. So was that always the intent, to kind of be a genre breaker, or is that the story itself just kind of breaks the genre in itself?
I think, you know, I feel like when you kind of intend to be great, a lot of times you're not going to be great, so it just happens. So I really wasn't trying to, you know, bend the genre. I was just trying to make something different. I was trying to be, you know, make something that really made a lot of sense to a whole lot of people. So if I did do that, that's cool, but that wasn't my intent.
Okay, cool. So there is this one thing about Miko as a central character, which is, at one moment, you know, I illustrate it as like being in a spider's web, and he's either the spider or the fly.
Yeah.
And I want to ask both of you, from your perspectives, you know, is that one or the other, or both, or how do you see, you know, this idea of Mike in the situation that he's in throughout his entire day, and how do you see that, or more importantly, how do you feel how it resolves to become which one or the other?
I knew it was going to really be hard to have 85% of the story written around one person. And I'll be honest with you, I had a lot of people telling me that it was really going to be bad. You know, it was going to end up coming out bad, because usually you can't, you know, hold someone for that long to be locked in and to be like 85% of the movie. So it was I like that analogy. I had to just hope and pray that he was going to be either one. He was going to either be that spider or whatever. So I thought it was cool, but people warned me and was like, "Yo, like you might be facing a big problem."
Yeah, I think I entered as a big big fly with a big ego, and then got humbled
Okay.
Yeah.
in many ways, but I think the cool part was to reveal not only to myself in the film, but and to my castmates in the film, but to reveal to audience members where, and that's my thing. You know, whenever I do a project, no matter what it is, I mean, it could be with my niece on a sidewalk and an iPhone and we do something 10 minutes. If I can touch someone, one person, you know, positively, to maybe, you know, to make their day, uplift them, to help them, to motivate them, then to me, it's just like doing a $30 million movie and doing the same thing, you know? And that's why The Life of Mike, you know, it was like, come here, help me with this as a project. You know, let's touch somebody. It may not, if 75, 80%, I didn't like it, I didn't care, that small percentage, like, yo, thank you. To me, that outweighs everybody and everything else. After the film, the initial cut, the first cut, they showed it, and you know, it was okay. Once Derek did a director's cut, and it took it to another level. But there was a young man and his mother that came up to me after I never saw him before in my life, and she was like, "My son wants to thank you." I was like, "What?
Yeah, you told
What?
me this. Yeah, you
What,
told me
what,
this,
what, what do you mean?" She was like, "Yes, his father, you know, we got divorced, and you know, he's been trying to live in the footsteps of his father, and this, and he came up, gave me some dap, gave me a hug. He was like, thank you. That right there, that moment, that it messed me up, but that made it worth this whole film. That one moment,
Wow.
you know?
Wow.
So, yeah, I mean, and you know, Derek is very meticulous sometimes. He's like, yo, we're not just gonna do one take, we're gonna do it with quality, not quantity, you know. And even though I may be tired, I'm like, oh, I think we got it. No, we're going to do it another 5 times. Like all of that made it worth it. That one moment, you know. So everything else, all of this, you know, is to me is icing on the cake for me.
And you see what I had to go through, like this 85%, like that long-winded.
Well, let's just
I was
talk
like,
about
damn,
that. Let's just talk about that.
Yeah.
I mean, like you're saying, it's
Let's talk about
85% of the 85% of the movie is him, and you had to find that right voice, even though you knew Miko, your friend, was going to be your principal.
Yeah.
You had to create Mike.
Yeah.
So talk about how you two collaborated to get him right on screen.
I remember he had told me that some of his experiences with doing other films, he was like, yo man, they just want me to come do my lines and go home. And what I wanted him to do was really tell me what he was feeling, tell me to interact with everybody. Now again, we got a little long-winded, you know, with some of the stuff, but as you can tell, you're not smiling, but it got a little long-winded, but to me, it made the movie good. And like I said, him being the principal, I'm really excited about that. But I hope that he kind of takes this experience and he's gonna go on other sets and be like, yo, like I do have something to say other than just my lines, you know. And so that's what I was really.
That's true. We talked about that before. My, you know, and that's always been my mentality somewhat because I've done LA and come back when the writers went on strike. But my mentality has always been like Outkast, the South got something to say. You know, out in LA, it was like, oh, you live in Atlanta, you don't take this serious. You have to be out here. You have to live out your car. You have to do this. You have to do that. And I'm like, when was your last film?
For real.
You know, I mean, no disrespect, but you know, it's not. I'm not any less passionate about what I do. You know, it's not where I'm from. It's where I'm at in that moment and what I can give and what I can bring. You know, so yeah, definitely. So. The passion was definitely there, especially with Derek, because I knew this was his first feature, and people would always come to him to try to get him to do certain things, certain projects, but it was. I want to be respectful. It wasn't. It was.
Please.
It was about, you know. Let's do it. How long? How much time? Oh, we got to be done in 6 days, but we're going to do this. And oh, well, what's the platform? Well, we're working on that. And I give him that respect. He waited. He was like, no, I'm not just going to do anything because I got the equipment and because I got a good eye, you know. And so he was like, yo, I'll do it myself. And that threw a lot of people off. And I'm not going to lie, it threw me off as well because. To those who go to film school to see his technique, that's unorthodox. You know, his aperture, it isn't right. And he's, the depth of field, it doesn't match because he should be, and he's like, dude, we're not doing all that.
Okay. All right.
But when you see it,
Yeah.
he cut out 4 steps when he only had to take 1, and it's just as good or better.
Yeah.
You know, and I learned that early on. So that's why I was like, yo, let's get it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
There is, staying on the character part for just a second.
Yeah.
As much as there are words in this film, there's a lot of silence. And to kind of think about Mike, the character, means that there's this internal Mike,
Yes.
and then there's this external Mike. And there's, you know, to contemplate, you know, the success of the character from the first act to the end, I would imagine you had to kind of figure out how to meter yourself to make those moments happen. Would that be true to say?
Yes. And it's still a work in progress for me to continue to learn how to do that, how to. My mother was very good at it. She could say a whole paragraph with one look. She'd give me that look. It could be the dip in the head. It could be just a little bite of the lip. But I knew every word she was saying. And that's something I'm still learning how to do on film, you know. And The Life of Mike, it allowed me to work on that. You know, it's like, and Derek as well was like, all right, I want this to be artistic, you know. And he would constantly say, the audience we don't have to tell them everything. And so I took that as like, all right, cool. But the silence and hopefully my emotion in my face, my demeanor, spoke volumes at times.
I was captivated by what you were able to do with your character, so I think you did it. There is something, without spoiling the film, there is a scene with you and a gun.
Ah.
You have to put a gun to your head, and
Not under his chin.
well,
Yeah.
You see how excited he got?
He is so
You see
ready
how
for
excited?
this.
He was a little bit too
Yeah,
excited
I
with this
know.
scene.
I'm sorry.
I mean,
just
he was.
felt, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
no, but seriously, that scene is very powerful,
Yeah.
and I could imagine that took a little bit of work to kind of really pull off to get that range that you wanted to get. Can you both of you talk to me a little bit about that particular scene And how did you craft it to get it to the point you got it that was so impactful?
So I'm gonna tell you this before Nico. So literally, he got it in the first take, and then all of a sudden we realized that we had the scope on the gun, and we were like,
I got to do it again.
We got to do it again. So and he had nailed it. So he ended up having to do it like 2 more times, but the end result was powerful. But I'm sorry. About
Yeah,
that.
I remember seeing certain scenes in different movies and things where, actors would, put it to their head and put it to their chin. And I didn't want to just do it to do it. I wanted to portray that it was methodical. It was decided,
Yeah.
and it was about to be implemented with my blessing, without hesitation. But when Derek yelled action, something was like, you have that subconscious, your spirit, your body, there was something that didn't know about, like, this is acting, this is fake, so there was that, dude, did you check the gun? Are you sure it's empty?
Yeah.
So you hear these little thoughts while while you're still
Our
trying
props
to.
master was like, yo,
Yeah.
like he was like, yeah.
But at some point I didn't want to go too deep, to where there was an imprint in my psyche that could possibly affect me later if something didn't go the way I thought it should. So I went in deep, and then I was like, okay, this is deep enough. This is deep enough. Let's black out the rest, that might seep in, and let's go through it. And cool, this guy was like, okay, yeah, you know what? Do it again, one last time, but this time I want you to really push it up in, and I'm
Yeah.
like, okay.
Okay, let's get it.
So to that, one of the things is that I won't call them stunts, but they are stunts. It's a very physical, demanding role.
Oh, yeah.
So let's
Thank
talk
you.
about
Oh, here we
this.
go. Here we go.
Let's talk about, like,
we go.
you obviously do your own stunts.
Because he's in 85% of the movie. Like, so,
There was no double.
right, no.
Oh.
So you talking about the we got 1%.
But Derek was, I mean, to his attribute, he was like, all right, I wanted to do that, but no, I know your knees,
Oh, yeah.
But I was like, if I know and we practice it, I'm good with it. You know what I mean?
And we were gonna, and it was crazy. When we did the table read, we were gonna get a stunt double, but we was reading we were doing the table read. Miko was like, man, we don't need to get no stunt double. I'll do it. And I was like, all right. And I got somebody that looked just like you, and he was like, nah, man, I'm good. And then when we got on set, he started asking for a mat, knee pads, all kind of crazy. And I was like, I thought you were good, but we literally knocked that scene out like what in one or two takes. So
I ain't had no mat. I ain't had no mat.
yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right.
I had no mat. I might have had a piece of cardboard. That was it.
No, you're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
Or knee pads.
But he did a good job.
Yeah, I
There we
only
go.
did 1 or 2 stunts. They were, I wasn't no Tom Cruise doing no crazy stuff, but
Yeah,
I made it.
But we got by it.
Yeah, I mean, so let's talk about the cast. And I thought the ensemble was very authentic in how they related to one another. But I'm just kind of curious about, like, even during the table reads, I would imagine that in order to maintain kind of the ethos of Mike, there has to be kind of a written detachment and an expectation of this disconnect as you're doing things. So even if actors who are accustomed to creating relationships, You're not doing that in this instance. You're basically breaking that typical role between actors' interactions, and then creating a new way of communicating to each other. Is that fair to say when you were working on these characters?
Yeah. When we did, I think, the first table read, one of the critiques of it was they were like, every character sounded like me. You know, because a lot of the people that helped out with this film, I knew them personally, or I know them personally. So they were like, like the sister kind of sounds like you. You know, the brother kind of sounds like you. So I had to, you know, kind of talk to the actors, and when we finally cast everybody, they were like, okay, we're gonna put our spin on it, because I'm open. I'm one of those, you know, quote unquote creators that I'm cool with being able to let everybody do their thing.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
That's- Yeah, that's a big, that was another big reason, well, not big reason, but that's one of the reasons why I like working with Derek, because he's not like, no, this is the way I wrote it. Nope, you stick to the script. This is the line. Say it the way I want you to say it. And that, you know, he'll say, hey, this is the vibe I want. This is what we're trying to portray, you know? And so now to have that freedom, you become more encompassed in the role, you know, and it helps a lot, in my opinion. You know?
Awesome. Well, Nico DeFore, thank you.
Yeah.
And we'll be right back. The clip we just saw is the new PSA, Most Men Suffer in Silence. And I'm happy to sit here on panel today to discuss this with this illustrious panel of actors and professionals. So please introduce yourselves.
All right. My name is Tony Evans, and Tony Evans Sr. I played the part of Dave in the movie The Life of Mike.
All right. My name is Dr. Vaughn Gay. I'm a licensed professional counselor and 20-year mental health practitioner.
And I'm Ryan Scott, actor, educator, host, and advocate for mental health.
Awesome. So one of the things about this film is it focuses on the central character, Mike. And Mike, from a professional standpoint, you can see there are signs. He's isolated, he tends to kind of push people away, but you can also see the suffering, right? Can you talk to me about, one, as an actor, when you read the script, how did you take Mike's character and then your own character of David and make that the conversations that you needed to make in order to tell that story?
So it's interesting that you say that because, of course, I'm a retired law enforcement. So the character of Mike is very familiar to me because a lot of law enforcement officers they embody that character, to where they internalize things, they don't express themselves, they're very withdrawn, And of course, so I've seen it throughout my career, it's very difficult for law enforcement officers to talk about their issues and the things that they go through. And, as a profession, we see things on a daily basis that, people just shouldn't see on a regular basis. Humans just shouldn't see. We deal with things and issues that people just shouldn't deal with on a normal basis. But this is day in and day out, and yet you're still taught to be macho. And hold things in, and you have to have it together for everyone else. So seeing, when I read the script, of course, there was an automatic connection with Mike and how he went through his transition through this movie. The part of Dave was a stretch for me, of course, because I'm the total opposite of Dave. And but yet I could identify with Dave because, you know, growing up in the hood as a young kid, you know, that's hey, you see that, you know, you did certain things, and, you know, but on the same token, as you got older, you know, as I got older, you know, transition from that. So it was definitely a stretch, but overall, like I said, both characters were familiar, very familiar to me, you know, and I could see the correspondence between the two of them, how they got to where they were.
Wow. So so Dr. Gay, when you saw this film and you saw Mike, I mean, I would imagine that this is not new to you.
Right, right.
And so you can see the correlations between what we saw in the PSA about how men suffer in silence,
Right.
and how this character just lived in one day through all of the traumas that he's exposed to.
Right, yeah. Mike, very stoic character, right? Very stoic. And also, when you look at Mike, he really is operating in a sense of isolation for the most part, right? And isolation can be dangerous in one or two different ways. We as men, because we, you know, kind of lean more towards the thinking realm, right? You know, logic, ration, processing. That requires a little bit of time by yourself to actually think things through, right? And a lot of times when we are isolating ourselves, it's not that there may be something wrong with us, we're processing things, okay? You add personality style to that. Me personally, I love, you know, a good little pocket of alone time so I can just sit, decompress, think about, you know, how to plan the next part of the day, or, you know, try to strategize on some things, right? That does require some alone time where you're just thinking and operating in silence, and sometimes in isolation. On the flip side, isolation can become very dark, right? In isolation and separating yourself and putting a wall up to protect yourself, when in actuality what it's doing is it's preventing others that can and want to help you from reaching you,
Yes.
right? And so that wall of protection actually becomes a prison, you know, for your own spirit, you know, on a daily basis. And so, you know, just, you know, as a professional, as someone that has, you know, been doing this work for nearly, you know, 2 decades, you know, we've seen it all, right? You know, have probably seen a lot of similarities and you know, areas that kind of cross one another, right? Seeing people in their most vulnerable state, you know, seeing people at their lowest moment, constantly, you know, day after day, you know, we're human, you know, and sometimes it can kind of mess with your psyche, you know, and so that's why it's very important for us to, you know, tap into different coping resources, you know, whether it is family, whether it is a little bit of alone time, whether it is going on that solo vacation, right? You know, you have to remember that we are humans, right? And I think that's something that, you know, we were not able to see in Mike, that other side of him, right? You know, the stoic part, that's part of who he is, right? You know, and going through an entire day and having him, you know, having us experience those traumas with him, very, very, very well written, you know, in terms of us being able to see men in a state to where they're not the big macho men all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Ryan, my question is, you know, based on what we've seen in the film, and we've talked a little bit about some of the traumas and, you know, how men do suffer in silence. One of the things from the beginning of the film is we see a suicide, and part of that is that survivor's guilt and the other kind of traumas that come from that. Can you share, we talked a little bit before this about some of your own personal stories. Do you mind sharing that with the audience?
Yeah, sure. So there's 2 stories, and I know one in particular. There's one that happened to me in college, but there was another one as I was just thinking about some things that were going on. A fraternity brother of mine actually, committed suicide several years ago, and he was just in a state of someone that I was really, really close with, as well. And he suffered from, a little bit of mental health, himself. Now, he was diagnosed. He did have a clinical diagnosis, and a few of us knew about it. And he really needed, additional support. And when he was, alone and he had, alone time, we were worried about him because there were, he would go through periods of isolation. So like, you would try to call him, you wouldn't get an answer. Well, one particular day we tried to call, and people were calling, and the periods just got longer and longer that we didn't hear from him. And then, finally, we found a note, from him, and it was something that we just. And this was a guy who was very machismo and kind of gave that persona that everything was okay. And it was such a shock to all of us that had happened, because we knew, he took time, he would just kind of cut folks off, but we didn't think that it was as severe as what it was. So I think it's really important to pay attention to those signs and really, hone in on behaviors that people have. And just because they may do something one or two times, because I know a lot of times, and I don't know the research on this, Doc, so maybe you could even weigh in on this, of folks that, say or talk about suicide and then actually do it. I know there's a discrepancy there, but, it's definitely something that really severely impacted, myself as well as the Brotherhood, and made me rethink about what does it look like to watch these people that we're close to. How do we help? How do we navigate those challenges that they may be facing?
All right. One stat that I do want to be able to provide, to support that, and the whole concept of men suffering in silence. Men complete their suicidal ideation, meaning they commit suicide at significantly higher rates than women, right? And that goes for every racial and ethnic group, right? And it's really, shows a pattern, right? Again, going back and looking at our society as a whole, right? What are the expectations and the pressures that we're placing on every man, right? Whether they are 60, 75 years old in that senior phase, whether they are, middle-aged men, young adults, or even these young men that are coming up, right? What are the expectations that we're placing on them, and then what are the consequences that we're forcing them to have to take on if they don't reach the societal standard of what manhood is? And that's just here within our country. Every country looks different, right? And so we consider ourselves a melting pot. We have, people from so many different backgrounds and different countries, but then we have this extremely high standard. If you do not meet that, then now your manhood and your masculinity is getting challenged, right? And if we're being honest, if we could just have, just individual epithets of what, life is like, those standards are almost impossible to reach and maintain every single day. It goes far beyond a sense of perfectionism that we would have to be able to establish within ourselves. So just getting a little bit more of a grip on reality on what's good enough for us, right? Being a king of your own kingdom as opposed to being a Superman and saving everyone, right? That really kind of places, us in our right positioning, and also the onus, for, other people to be able to be a part of that kingdom and help us out.
So one of the things that stands out to me from this conversation is stigma, right? Not just the stigma of not being a man, but also the stigma of being a man who needs help.
Yeah.
And you've all worked in different parts of law enforcement and in therapies. How does that, for you, one, pattern how you, knowing these things, professionally, these things, how does that help you to help other people understand that a stigma is not something that you should be focused on? You should be really focused on your well-being.
Well, it's funny that you say that, because, of course, a lot of what we see from the social media, where law enforcement officers are abusing someone or beating someone up, a lot of what you're seeing is actually undiagnosed PTSD. From the simple fact that they, I tell everyone, so funny, when I got into the profession, I never wanted to be a cop.
Really?
Never wanted to be a cop. That was not my calling. And in fact, I hated cops. I told my cousin when he approached me with the idea, hey man, you should be a cop. I don't want to do that, man. That's not
me.
And it's so funny, because God convicted my heart and was like, if you don't like them, then do something about it. So getting into the field, it put me in a position to where, I was doing it and I could actually do it and show the public that, you can be cool and be a cop. Yeah. However, once I got into the profession, I began to see things from a different perspective, and always been in tune. So looking at some of my coworkers and in the profession period, there's a lot of pressure that's placed on law enforcement officers. They say that the job is stressful. The job itself, most officers love the job itself, but a lot of the problems that come are internal. From supervisors that are higher up that should never be in a supervisory role, and toxic leadership, that that whole thing that creates pressure. And now you're going out and you're dealing with suicide calls, and you're dealing with people and their issues. I often say that every time that mic keyed up, It was never someone saying, hey, I got something good for you.
Yeah.
Every time that mic keyed up and you went out on a call, it's something negative.
Yeah.
And time after time after time after time, if you don't clear that out of your system, it's just going to build up and continue to build and continue to build. And it's like pressure on a pipe. Eventually, that pipe's going to burst. You know, and it's unfortunate, but a lot of law enforcement officers as well go through their entire careers, retire, and they die because of the stress that has, you know, been on them for so many years that they never ever dealt with. You know, because they never, it's not macho, although, you know, the means are there because we have EAP, you know. A lot of people don't take advantage of that because of the stigma that comes behind that. That means that I don't know what I'm doing. And it took me 15 years of law enforcement before I realized, yo, I can't sleep.
Right.
Yo, why am I having these visions and I need some help? And of course, you know, from that standpoint, the more I began to talk about it, the more I realized that what my training officer told me, he said, when you leave the precinct, when you get down the road, pick out a spot. When you get to that spot, that's where you leave your day. Great advice, but the most horrible advice that I've ever received. It's great because it allows you to deal with it immediately, but horrible long term because you never deal with it.
Right.
Just bottles up. Huh?
It just bottles up
never
and keeps
unpack it,
piling up and keeps piling up. You know, so I speak to you from the law enforcement perspective because, you know, of course that's my profession, but that happens in every profession. Because one thing for certain, you're gonna have toxic leadership.
Right. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
And people who are dealing with their own issues because hurt people hurt people.
Yeah.
And that toxic leadership period translates into pressure for the people who work up under them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so, you know, from that perspective, that's, you know, something that I tried, you know, as a major, you know, I always said that, you know, they always say in law enforcement, the stuff rolls downhill. I always said, no, it stops at me.
Yeah.
Nice.
It almost seems like, you know, you got to the point to where you realize that, you know, the ethos within the police department is that if you need help, right, then you're not strong enough. You know, you're not built for this.
Right.
But in reality, you realize, no, I have to get the help so that I can be strong and be the best, you know, best version of myself within this field. And so with that shift in thinking, do you think that more law enforcement officers would take on that wellness approach, or do you think that it would still be more of, I just got to see it through because of the stigma?
Speed of the leader, speed of the team.
Okay.
If leadership begins to take that approach, then you'll have a paradigm shift throughout the entire law enforcement
Okay.
community.
Nice.
You know,
Yeah.
and you know what? And it's making me think, kind of shifting just a little bit, thinking about the leadership within a home, right?
Yes.
And I'm thinking about young people,
Yes.
and I'm thinking about the bricks and the things that they're carrying.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Particularly young black men,
Right,
right? You know,
right.
I mean, they don't start off as just men that are suffering in silence. They start off as boys.
Boys, exactly.
So
Absolutely.
so in thinking about, you know, the things that they're carrying and the bricks that they're carrying and the way that they're taught not to, you know, of course, not be a crybaby or not be a sissy or not be any of these things. You know, that stuff builds. And when you have, you know, nowhere to take it, you know, that eventually that pipe does burst.
Yes.
You know, for some. And then that might not be necessarily as major as suicide, but it may be homicide. It may
Right,
be
absolutely.
some other things that, you know, some other toxic behaviors that if we don't get around and don't, you know, have that leadership, that's, you know, and in all cases, sometimes there's external factors and things, friends and groups that you're around. But if we don't, you know, take a hold of those things and talk, you know, right? Start talking and learn how to listen and talk, you know,
Right,
communicate.
right.
You know, then that's when we begin to have trouble, and then they become men that
Yeah.
are suffering in silence.
That's a
So,
good.
so Doc, it's so funny that you said that because, you know, as black men, we can identify with this. You know, anytime we leave, our homes are supposed to be our sanctuary.
Right.
But anytime we step foot outside of that door, there's this pressure.
Oh yeah.
There's this pressure that the world doesn't care anything about us. And it builds and it builds. Your safety, we have to be this when we go out. You're always watching your six. You know, you're always, looking. You're always on guard.
Paranoid.
Paranoid.
Paranoid, literally.
Right.
Literally paranoid.
So it's a certain level of PTSD. What do you guys think about, dealing with that from the perspective of just the average man who's just, especially a black man who's dealing with that? Because that translates to any race.
Right. Yeah. Right.
To any race. But, especially because we're dealing with the police. Mm-hmm. We're dealing with women.
Right.
We're dealing with so many different aspects of that. What do you guys?
Just so on a personal level, we'll take the clinical hat off for a second, right? From a personal level, peace is very important to me, but I also understand that peace has a price, right? And depending on how you structure your life, that peace can get very, very, very expensive, okay? I found myself a couple of years ago in a space to where I started noticing a pattern. This is during COVID, okay? I was building my practice, right? So I would do a therapy session, and then while I'm doing therapy, I'm starting to think and process other things that are going on in life, right? The stressors, okay? And then so after I finished the therapy session, I would go down into my basement, my man cave, and kind of just sit, decompress, and then I get a notification, come right back up, do another therapy session. So I started finding myself going through that back and forth pattern for day after day, week after week. And after about the second month, I said, wait a minute, I think I'm going through depression right now. And it felt very ugly. It felt very nasty. It felt like I was being my worst enemy even saying that. But the one thing I did not want to do was to say that to someone else.
Right.
So now I'm carrying that weight, right? Now I'm trying to be my own clinician, my own psychiatrist, right? While still doing my job. Had a newborn son, brand new wife, right? How do you deal with all this? And mind you, and this is all learning things on the fly because growing up in a home, right, where the father, was dealing with his own mental health issues, right? I'm learning everything on the fly. What have I gotten myself into, right? And so it took me about 2 years to fight. I tell people all the time, I beat depression, I fought it, I battled, and I won, right? And the reason why I'm able to say this out loud now is because I eliminated that stigma, right? That we said is on a personal level, right? When you throw that away and say, hey, listen, this is what I'm dealing with, this is what I'm going through. Yes, even me, the big tall dad and, therapist and, doctor with all this great, yes, even I, am prone, and then after I kind of pulled myself out of that, here came a little bit of anxiety. And I said to myself, the first time I am experiencing all these on a personal level in my late 30s, I have to give my patients a lot more credit, right? Because of what they've been dealing with for years, right? And have still chosen resilience in life, over, just choosing not to be here, right? They help me to understand that even when people contemplate suicide, or even start to get those dark thoughts, right? I tell them all the time, even if you decided to go through with this, you will never know if it actually worked, right? You will never know if life could actually get better. If we were to change a few things that's going on right now that's really pushing you to that place, would you still want to not be here? And 100% of these patients have said, you know what, you're right, I would want to be here. We just changed a few things, all right? So that's the hope that we want to be able to share, with people that's listening to this message, right? Hope, efficacy, resilience, optimism. You got to become that hero within yourself.
No doubt.
It's amazing.
Good, Doc.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Ryan, you got anything? Oh, no. I was echoing. I mean, I'm echoing, those thoughts, 100%. I just think that it's just so important, and I go back, I'm a proponent for the youth. I have 3 boys of my own.
Yeah.
So when I think about their mental health and I think about, the pressures of society and the things that they have, I have no choice but to be the man that's not suffering in silence. I have to be the one who has to be that leader, that's not a toxic leader, but the one that's going to be able to pour into them. And I talk to my boys now. I say, hey, I don't care what nobody else, how every other households get, you're going to talk to me. And we set up times, and they don't just talk, right away. You have to find a vehicle sometimes to get that happen, whether that's playing ball with them or grabbing a bite to eat, but finding some way to get folks to talk, because people will talk and people have stuff to say. You just have to find that vehicle sometime. And maybe Doc, maybe you could share, some methods and some thoughts, on things that folks can do, because I know there's a lot of people, a lot of viewers probably at home wondering, hey, well, I want to be able to talk to my son. I want to be able to talk to my husband. I want to be able to talk to, some male or young lady in their lives, but just don't know how,
I would say that even when you're coming back to the film and just kind of thinking about why is Mike the way he is. You know, he found his dad in this way. And I'm curious, during the read, did Mike ever share everything he saw with his siblings? Because if he internalized all that on his own, that's a whole different way that you would see this character and empathize with him a little differently than if you went through that with him as his brother.
So there's a struggle between Mike and Dave as it relates to that because, of course, we had the same mother, but we didn't have the same father. So within that, I had as Dave, my character, I had a deep disdain for Mike's father. And what Dave was going through, I couldn't identify with that because of the simple fact that that's his stuff. He loved his dad. He was the golden child. For me, no, I never liked him. And I'm glad he's gone. You know, and we had some back and forth about that because of the simple fact that I had no compassion for what he was going through. You know, as Dave, I'm dealing with my own stuff, man. I'm trying to make it happen. I'm trying to live life. I'm trying to, you know, just have a ball. And, you know, and what you're dealing with, Mike, man, stop. You're just too, you know.
He's harsh and you're mellow.
Exactly. Let me smoke my weed. And
He's my own mind.
Right. I got my own stuff.
Yeah.
You know, your dad messed me up, you know.
Yep.
So you're crying about this guy. And that's real life because at the end of the day, the one thing that we all have is perspectives. We could be looking at the same situation, but from a different angle, a different perspective, and it takes on a totally different form.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, that's, you know, it's vitally important, you know, as you know, it's something that I wanted to say also is that we were talking about fathers, being a father. And for me, I raised 2 boys and a daughter. And as they got older, I tried to show a certain level of transparency when going through certain issues. Because, of course, they have this image of what dad is. You know, dad is tough, dad's a police officer, dad's this. No, dad has issues, problems. Dad goes through everything that everybody else goes through and that you're gonna be faced with at some point. You know, my son is a country artist, Tony Evans Jr., and he goes through a lot, you know, because that industry is not easy. It's very difficult, you know, so I hope that I've shown him, you know, ways to cope and deal with that. But one of the things that, you know, for anyone who's going through stuff, you know that in our lives, we've gone through problems, we've gone through issues. But one thing is for certain, when we have that issue that we didn't think we were gonna make it through, we always made it through.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Absolutely.
We always made it through, and it's okay. It's okay because we stand on our own little islands, and we think nobody else is going through what we're going through.
Right.
You know, Tony, I think you actually answered his question. Which is good, right? Because a lot of, you know, even when we're in that therapy space, right, it's part clinical, part personal, right? You know, personal experience and what kind of has worked, you know, that we've, you know, have done ourselves or even kind of seen others, right? So he said, you know, a lot of people want to be able to talk to their children. How can they make that connection? Communication in relationships, when you start early, you don't have to do a lot of work on the back end, right? So when you establish trust, right, vulnerability and transparency with your children, right, across, you know, of course, certain things that they can handle across different stages, right? Then as they get older and reach those teenage years, when they get very emotional, right, and their decision making is really poor, and they are, you know, left field, right field, right? They know that if they come to dad, right, there's always giving good feedback, right? Never got emotionally out of control, never blew up on me, right? Never cursed me out, which is happening a lot. A lot of these parents, they're dealing with their own personal stuff, their own bricks, right, are taking those bricks and launching them at their own children, right? And so your son's life and even his career is going to be positively impacted because you established, you know, that level of communication and connectivity very early on. right? It's hard to get into a young person's mind once they reach teenage years, young adult years, and they have their own perspective on the world, right? While still holding on to maybe some issues that they may have with the parent that were left unresolved, okay? So if you got some things going on with your children, handle it early, right? Get some resolution to it, right? Apologize, be transparent, own your mistake, accountability is the word that we like to use a whole lot.
I was also, I mean, to me, it feels like, you know, even in that space, it's trial and error, right?
Absolutely.
And being honest with yourself to say, this didn't go the way I wanted to go. Okay, I learned from it. Let's try something else. Because I think from what you're saying, it's like, you know, we all know people who are trying to discipline and trying to do the right things, but they'll give up.
Right.
And even if you're not a dad, or maybe you're a teacher or a counselor, you'll try, but you're only going to do so much. And unfortunately, that's when the suffering continues.
Yes.
So to that, you know, when we think about that suffering in silence and the lessons that we're talking about today, can you share, I mean, you kind of shared a little bit of how you process, you shared a little bit about you. What about you, Ryan? How do you process your safe space?
Well, you know, there's a couple things. One is prayer. You know, for me, you know, I'm a child of God, so I like to, you know, go into my quiet space and I pray. Another method is, you know, I do have a great family circle, so I have a lot of accountability and a group of friends, a circle of people who hold me accountable.
Nice.
And definitely, you know, hone into me and pour into me. And they tell me about myself when I'm wrong, but they also praise me when I'm right. And they don't get hyped up on anything that I'm doing professionally in my career. It's a authentic, you know, relationship. And those are things that come over time. But they've proven themselves. They've shown themselves. They've shown consistency in you know, in my life. Yeah. That's helped get me through some of those tough times, particularly in those times where I'm down. Right. You know, you have to have a balance in some folks that are able to, you know, pour into you. And then finally, I would say physically, I would say the gym. You know, doing something to keep yourself active, to keep yourself, to kind of keep you moving and getting your mind off of it. Sometimes when you're sitting, you know, just home alone and you're just sitting in the corner, you know, those, you know, they say isolation's the devil's playground. So you sit there and there's a lot of thoughts that come in your head, you know, and you know, and a lot of them happen to be negative. Picking up a phone sometimes, and I think we talked a little bit about this earlier, was, you know, you can talk about, you know, being isolated on, you know, and your phone will pick it up, and then next thing you know, there's a bunch of sad music and sad, you know, things, you know, isolation and, you know, thoughts of suicide or different, you know, mental health issues or challenges that come up as a result. You could even Google search, you know, something negative about how to do something, and the next thing you know, you have a ton of information and it's hitting you left and right at your device. Right. So it's so important to have connection, you know, with people. So dealing with that. So God, for me, you know, family for me, as well as physical activity help me cope in you know, during those times.
Getting back to the natural things.
Yeah. I'll share this. I don't have a therapist anymore. My therapist quit me. Oh, I told you. I was contemplating.
You graduated. I like that.
Years ago, and I had a really hard time. And then went to talk to my best friend. Convinced me to go to therapy. I've been seeing this therapist now for like 12 years, and now she's like, you know how you have the tools. You don't need me anymore. And I felt like she was breaking up with me. But it is what it is. And it's one of those kind of things where, you know, these conversations are personal because we've all gone through it as men. We've all had these moments of pressure and stress and strain. But it's always kind of good to see that light at the end of the tunnel. Yes. And so as we wrap this up, I would want to leave everything on a positive note. So I'd like each of you to kind of just give a positive sign of that, you know, we don't have to suffer in silence.
The isolation of being on your own island and feeling like you're by yourself and you're going through it by yourself, you know that there are millions of people going through the same exact issue that you're faced with, and the same exact things. As you can see, the three of us, you know, we're not friends, we haven't had a bond, but we've gone through some of the same issues, and we can identify, the four of us, shall I say, can identify with some of the same things. So if anything that I would like to impart upon people is basically this, that it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay, and that you're not alone. Don't be afraid to express how you feel. It's not going to make you look any other than, it's not going to make you look weak, or it's not going to make you look, a certain way, because people really want to help. And by you expressing it, you may be thinking that you're getting help, but you may ultimately be helping somebody else.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
I would say keep things in perspective, right? 100 years ago, none of us were around. 100 years from now, none of us will be around, right? So we are all having this life experience. It's a shared experience with each other, right? We've talked a lot about how the digital world has separated us so much from one another, right? It's created a false sense of reality. You got to get back to the main thing and keep the main thing, all right? Have some fun. Give yourself permission to do some things that you may want to do, but you place so many parameters around to where you really have just kind of kept yourself away from enjoying it, right? Take yourself out to eat for a little bit, for every now and then, okay? You do so much for others, all right? And then we complain about no one's reciprocating it. Yeah, well, you're included in that. You got to reciprocate that back to yourself as well. Go to the gym, right? Spend some time, on yourself. I'm a very big fan of, you take your family on vacation, take your wife on a vacation, then you take you on a vacation, right? It is completely fine, because you want to make sure that everyone is getting the optimized version of you, not the beat down, worn down, tired, don't have money for this, sad, unhappy, angry, assertive, aggressive. No, that's not what they got into. They want the best version of you. So the only person that's going to be able to bring that to the forefront is you. Yeah.
Awesome.
And I'd say this too shall pass.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Whatever you're going through, and I don't care if it's been 2 days or 20 years, whatever you're going through, you can get through. There's nothing new under the sun.
Right.
There's, a lot of resources. There's a lot of help out there. I know mental health, you can call 988. Absolutely. I know is a resource. There's always somebody willing to help you, no matter what you're going through. And I encourage people to be an advocate for yourself. Even if you don't believe it, give it a try. Give it a try, because it can certainly change your life, and you can do it. You can do it.
Awesome. All right, well, Tony, Dr. Gay, Ryan, thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.